Welcome to Krome Cast. Check it out. I'm Sam Major, Commercial Director for Krome Technologies, and joined once again by my business partner, Mr. Rupert Mills.
Hi everyone.
So this edition is talking about Microsoft Copilot, which we have talked about before on the pod, but that was me and Doug from Microsoft, or Mike from Dougrosoft, you'll remember that episode. But we focused then on kind of security and governance, compliance, etc. But this is much more around, well, I guess, the real world use of Copilot. So if you want to talk us through the top three things you and I will cover today.
Yeah, we thought we'd talk a little bit about some real world use cases, places where we're seeing people starting to use it a bit, demo Copilot in some daily tasks, and then just have a brief conversation at the end about selecting the right AI tool for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start, I guess, let's right at the top. We all know of Copilot. Everyone nowadays is using some sort of AI in some fashion, but it's interesting to understand how we actually do apply that in the real world in our jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot at the moment of people saying, oh yeah, I really want to put AI in, and some people are using ChatGPT, some people are using Copilot. There's 100 million different AIs out there all of a sudden. But what we are seeing is that people are using them almost as a glorified search engine. So there's a lot of people just using it in that way rather than actually delving into what it can do for you in a bit deeper fashion. We did some work with some of our customers recently looking at, okay, specific departments in the business and what they can do with it. So I'll show you in a demo in a minute, for example, giving it a whole bunch of CVs to review and getting it to review those against the job posting and actually start to help you select or expedite selection when you've got a lot to review. That's a good example. Its ability to chart data in Excel for you, that sort of thing. I did a real world example with a team I was working with recently of just actually getting it to prepare an agenda for an evening out for a business event and that sort of thing. So those sorts of things to actually get it to do a bit more for you. We've got some really in-depth training on it, and we're doing some drop-in sessions, which will be on the website soon. But welcome you to join those if you want to. There'll be
a link.
Yeah, there'll be a link somewhere down there. But yeah, exactly. So we're doing some in-depth sessions, but we thought it'd be worth just showing a few examples here for people that haven't used it or don't know what the benefit might be to them in their day-to-day of the things it can do. And then from there, we can then go into, okay, if you want to explore it in more detail, get in touch.
I think it's important that it's the how to use it. Like you say, it's very good as a search engine, some of them, to be honest with you, but that's not the power of it. But also I think there's just a quick warning on the tread carefully bit, because it's very easy to let's trust AI to do it all for us.
100%.
And it's making sure you have that manual processing to check, especially if you're doing things like financial modelling, whatever it might be. In the pharma world, it might be research, etc. Make sure that you actually, someone has to do that due diligence, because we have seen hallucinations and so on in AI. You know, it's fallible. So we really need to tread carefully on our use. But that being said, in these use cases, it can really speed up our ability. You know, take tasks that have taken historically half a day, could be done in minutes. So the productivity that we get back as business owners can be massive if used appropriately in the right way.
Yeah, it does. No substitute for knowing what you're talking about and checking it properly. We had one very recently with an organisation that was doing some costs around what it was going to cost to put a load of stuff in AWS. And they actually didn't use Copilot, they used ChatGPT, but asked ChatGPT what it would cost to put everything in AWS. And the cost came back, and then they came back and said, look, this looks really, really expensive. When I looked at the detail with them, what it had actually done was taken the AWS costs from a competitor to AWS, who was publishing the top level, most expensive possible costs on their website to highlight why they're cheaper. And ChatGPT had used that as the source for its AWS costs rather than getting them from AWS, which meant that they looked at it and went, okay, that's going to cost us 4 million as opposed to about 800,000. So those types of conversations are happening as well. So you just need to check it, but it's, as you say, very useful to jumpstart something.
100%. I guess talking about jumpstarting and how do we use it, then it's probably worth you and I let's jump into the demo and show people how you use this in your daily work.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key areas that I can't really demo because we're sat next to each other is Teams. That's been really, really useful. We might slice something on that into the podcast, or if not, it'll be in one of the demos with Doug when he runs them. But why don't we let's start with Microsoft PowerPoint. If I open up PowerPoint, and I can give the example that I gave just recently of actually getting it to create an event for me. So if we are, as an example, based in Windsor, which is just around the corner from here, we want to take some clients out for dinner and we want some options, we could ask Copilot something along the lines of, so create a presentation about options for a team dinner for an office of 15 people to dine out in Windsor. Now, you can be a bit more specific with it than that. We might have some people with special dietary requirements.
Yep.
So please include locations with vegetarian options and
Avoid
sample menus, in your case. Okay, so we press go, and that's, so if I said to, and I did this as actually as a joking example with my assistant, and I said, okay, produce that, and then we were talking about whether or not AI might replace people one day, and then I got AI to do it, and actually it did it very, very quickly, as it just has, generate slides. But yeah, real world use cases, actually, things like this can help someone like that in their day-to-day job. If Catherine took this and said, actually, I'll use this to speed that up, and then she can do the due diligence of going through the options and making sure they're right, because that's the fact checking behind it. 100%. But it will create something very, very quickly for that scenario. And you can see it's generating the slides as we speak. It starts to create them and fill them out as it goes.
And like you said, I mean, this is something that would take, imagine you're sat there doing it old school way, you go into Google, you put in restaurants, then you want to try and work out, do they or do they not, are they vegetarian, are they vegan, their location, etc.
Yeah.
As a PA, EA, I could easily see that being an hour or two's work.
Yeah.
Easily, quite easily in fact, and that's taken literally seconds.
Yep, less
to
than
put all the options for
less than a minute. It's given us some good options. The King's Feast, got Green Garden Bistro, Royal Thai Palace, and if you look through, it's given specific slides around vegetarian options on the menu. We can drill into that.
Very clever.
Yeah. So if you think, as you say, about how long that would take someone to do, it doesn't substitute for someone going through. One of the things I find interesting with PowerPoint when it does this, it also creates, not so relevant in this situation, but speaker notes at the bottom. So if you ask it to create your presentation, and so this is just a YouTube friendly example, but you could ask it to create you a presentation to speak about something you have to speak about, and it will do the research for you in the background. You should really check that research before you go off and speak about it, because if you end up back in the AWS scenario telling people it's going to cost 4 million instead of 800,000, you're in.
But it strawmans, or even stillmans it for you to a certain extent. You've got a lot of content there to verify that it is accurate. Put your own sprinkling of whatever it might be to make it more personal to you. I don't think we should all just spit out what the system says. But as a time saver, as an example of a time saver, that's huge. And you think, what's a Copilot license? Off the top of my head, about
£25 a month.
A
roughly.
month. There you go. So, as a time saver, however, as one example of a job that's just taken someone minutes rather than hours, in one task, it's paid for itself to be there. And when you talk about Copilot, it's expensive, and it is at scale. If you've got hundreds, thousands of people, it is expensive. But if by spending the £25 per person per month, you give them back an hour a day, 2 hours a day, you are more than paying for that investment.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing you can do, which is a very useful part of it, is you can track who is actually using Copilot and make sure that actually if you've got an organisation, as you say, of 200 people, for example, you might want to buy 20 licenses to start with, issue them out to people, and then if they're not using them, say to them, right, actually, let's cycle these through to other users and pick where it, and again, that's part of the conversation at the end, but we'll talk about where it sits in the business. Anyway, so that's a very quick example in PowerPoint of something you could do with it to highlight things. Now, if I was to, instead of that, let's take a browser session and just say, I'm going to take the recruitment conversation we're having. And let's pick up job postings. We've got some samples here from some test data. And I can say to Copilot, please take this job description and compare it to the CVs, then give me the top 3 most suitable candidates. And I can take all of that and give it to Copilot, which it has, and say go, and it's having a think. So I was having an interesting conversation about unconscious bias. And it's very interesting when you think about somebody might be reading a CV and have unconscious bias in it as to the person, but AI won't, because it doesn't think about that sort of thing. It doesn't think about what someone's name is or where they live or anything like that. It's looking now, because I've asked it to, at who's the most relevant.
Yeah.
So it's responded here, and you can see, let's drag that window wider, that actually the 3 most relevant are John Doe. He's got over 5 years experience in managing and maintaining IT infrastructure. This is for an IT admin job role. Various certifications. Jane Smith with 3 years experience, and Bob Johnson with 5 years, and highlighting why, and then giving me the CVs. So you can see immediately that actually, if you had 80 applicants for a job role, you could actually get something like Copilot to shortlist to the top 10, and then you can go through that top 10 manually, and your recruitment team can do that and have a look at it, then start talking to those. You can then go back to Copilot, and actually Doug will do this in far more depth in his demo, but one of the interesting things he did was actually take, and their salary expectations, and then start, if you go deeper with that, what's it going to cost me to train some of the ones with lower salary expectations to the same level as the ones who have higher salary expectations already there? How long is it going to take? Which training courses should I get them involved? And it can start to do in a layer on the detail more and more and more, but you can just see in terms of a time save how quickly that sort of thing can turn around
we know how long that takes, because we're always hiring. And have conversations with Becky around how many applicants we get to jobs, and you could be talking hundreds, and poor Becky has to open each one and go through it. And the unconscious bias thing is actually quite interesting, because I know personally, if I'm reading a CV, I'm a big sports guy, and if someone's interest on there would be my sport, I would definitely have a lean towards them. And that's completely unfair, right, when you really think about it. But it wouldn't consciously do it, but when I really think about it, would it make me go, probably would. But the machine doesn't care. It will go, as it has done there, time in role, accreditations, experiences, all the things you should be looking at primarily.
Absolutely.
And as the time, so like you say, you put in, let's call it 10 CVs there, and it took literally seconds to do that analysis. If that was a person doing it, time to read each CV, time to actually work that out, time to then put it into some results to provide you with some notes. Again, it's saving hours.
So I was going to do a demo in Word next, just a quick one, but it's interesting. I've opened up Word, and one of the examples Copilot is suggesting for me is list of ideas for a fun remote team building event. It's probably because I just asked it to help me organise a team dinner in PowerPoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it learns from...
And you're hiring people.
Yeah, indeed.
So people new to the team need to be onboarded and made feel welcome.
Yeah, there you go. So, but in Copilot, so for example, one of the things that we were talking about the other day is documentation for end users. And as an IT organisation, I could use Copilot and say something along the lines of, can you help create a set of instructions for me to show end users how to use self-service password reset when they are trying to regain access to our Microsoft 365 environment for a non-technical audience, please. So, user documentation, the bane of every IT person's life, and doing that, but in a very short space of time, you can see. And I can then take that there. Barring a bit of formatting or putting it into a template, that's a user instruction document that would have taken someone half an hour to write and sit down and go through, and probably not done quite such a good job of it. Again, you need to then check it afterwards and make sure it works.
But it's also that, as you know, it's the finding the time to do the documentation. As a business that's been around now for many years, we know that the tech's focus is do the job, get it working, or bring the solution to life, whatever it is. Bane of every tech's life is sitting down and actually doing the accompanying documentation. But if you can feed in your notes as you go on the project you're doing, and at the end of it, Copilot and go, here's my recommendations of the documentation that goes with this, and then all they're doing is going, actually, yes, no, omit, add, whatever it might be. But the editing part of that is far less work than having to do the heavy lifting of the documentation as you're trying to concentrate on bringing a solution to life or troubleshoot a problem or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Again, saving hours, if not days.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's things where someone might know how to do something or know what they want, but not know how to do something. I'll dive into a quick Excel example, and then I think we'll probably leave it there. But as I say, much more detail available if you want to join one of our drop-in sessions. So let's have a quick look. Yep. So, right, let's dive into an Excel example. I've got some sample data here for supermarkets.
Yep.
Let's dive into Copilot. And it might be that, okay, I'm relatively new to Excel and I know what I want, but I don't know how to get it. So I can say, can you please create me a chart showing product sales by region. It's going away and looking at the data it's got to understand what it's doing with it. And I can go back to my AI answer and add it to a new sheet.
Yeah.
And there we go. So I've got product sales by region. We could then ask it to go back into that data and drill more into it, etc.
Yeah.
But very, very quickly, if I don't know how to draw a graph in Excel, for example, or something along those lines, I can start to do that. You can use it to create pivot tables. You can ask it questions about your data and it will come back in. Yeah, but it's not just a search engine.
No, it's super clever, because that's the sort of thing that I sit there smashing a keyboard trying to get Excel to tell me, which takes quite a while. I imagine it could help me with the right sort of formulas I need to achieve and whatnot, which saves me going to bother our CFO all the time for a simple formula, which drives me nuts. And wouldn't even attempt to do a pivot table on my own, but actually with that to assist me, it's the sort of thing actually, I can put more into the business without having to bother the likes of Alex to tell me how to, use AutoSum.
Yeah, absolutely. Other examples I've found using it in day to day is things like, okay, I can say to it, tell me last week all the important emails that I failed to respond to and order them by priority. So I can go back and say, all right, actually, I need to go back and deal with those things that I forgot about. Or look at my diary for the next month and tell me when the best time to arrange a half-day workshop will be, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And just quickly go through stuff like that.
It's quick wins, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's not taking off the stuff that it can't do, right? But it gives you more time to do that. So the strategic bit, the bit that really moves the needle for our business, you then have more time to do, because the bit that we all have to do, there's the day job, right? And it's the creating the document or writing the supporting document for a project, whatever it might be. If you can speed that up, it gives back, so we've made money, but it gives you more time to focus on the areas that will really move the needle for the business. It takes the noise away.
Yeah. So I think for what we wanted to do, there's some quick, just real world examples and examples of the stuff that we'll go into much more detail if you want to. Feel free to drop in on one of those sessions that I said. But outside of that, the final point that we were going to discuss was selecting the right AI tool for your business.
Indeed. So this obviously we're looking at Microsoft Copilot, but as you've said before, there's many different LLMs and AIs out there, but then into the vendor world, and there are the Oracles, and everyone's got their own AI, and it is, how do we make that selection that's appropriate for our business?
Yeah, so from an IT perspective, we're seeing a lot of people coming in and saying, right, our HR department want to buy Workday's AI, our accounts department want to buy SAP's AI, our this department want to buy that AI, and you're starting to see different areas of the business. We had a conversation just recently with recruiters from the recruitment platform's AI, and different areas of the business are asking to bring AI tools into their application stacks. And there's some really good stuff out there, but I think the key point is comparing what you get in the different stacks and comparing what you're going to get from a generic AI tool like Copilot, which is going to give you a whole bunch of things you can do across lots of different platforms, with the individual AIs where you're doing a specific task. So for example, it might well be worth the FD having the SAP AI, but does everybody in the finance team need it, or might they be better with a blend of that and Copilot AI? So it's worth considering that in your role, and it's worth also considering whether or not everybody in your business needs Copilot. So we had a conversation with someone around, I'd really like AI to be able to answer questions that go to our HR department. I want to give it a set of HR documents and have it able to do that. So then people can use Copilot. But then it's going to cost me £30 or £25 a month per user to get that question answered. Well, not necessarily, because then you start to look at things like Copilot Studio, where you can actually say, let's create a Teams channel in Teams using Copilot Studio that's HR questions, give it all the HR library documents, and people can go and ask questions in the same way that I just did to that Teams channel in Copilot Studio. But Copilot Studio charges per message. So actually what you end up doing is paying probably 10, 20, 30 pounds a month for people asking all their HR questions rather than licensing everybody for Copilot. So those various different selection criteria for what you're doing with it, whether it's best to go in the dedicated vendor's AI or a more generic platform AI, where it keeps your data is obviously another very important question. And data governance around it, as you've discussed and hopefully was linked in that video earlier. But all of those pieces, selecting the right tool is something we're spending some time helping people with as well.
Yes. Which is also something we can help you with. So if you are looking at, if you're watching this, hopefully you are, and you're trying to understand what is the best AI for our business, then by all means do contact us and we'll be happy to help you navigate that journey. So all that remains for me to thank you for your time, Rupert.
No problem.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Krome Cast. Take it out. Remember to like, subscribe and share. And if there's anything you'd like us to cover in future episodes, do leave that in the comments below. Thank you for joining us. Take it out.